As we reach the end of the third quarter of 2023, about to enter the tail end of the year, it's clearly difficult to see a bright horizon for the northern half of Africa. Two major natural disasters, magnified by poor governance, bad infrastructure, caused the death of at least 7,000 people in the Maghreb region alone. Between Morocco's earthquake and Libya's flood, tens of thousands of people have been rendered homeless and facing extraordinary circumstances and problems ahead. In the Sahel, there is no shortage of crises, with the headlines this week focusing on a Tuareg rebellion in northern Mali and the West African group ECOWAS struggling to control the junta that toppled the unpopular president of Niger, Mohamed Bazoum, even insisting the unrealistic scenario of him returning to power. This is Arezki Daoud, principal analyst at advisory firm Risk LLC and founder and editor of the North Africa Journal. Today is Friday, the 22nd of September 2023. Let's look at the region this week. Now, true, the disasters in Morocco and Libya have led to some cooling off of regional tensions, at least for a short-term period. In the northwest corner of Africa, the quake that devastated the El Haouz region of Morocco has resulted in the conflict between Algeria and Morocco to take a backseat for now. Now, don't misinterpret my message. These two countries have absolutely no intention of making peace. Leaders there, actually no, they're not leaders, they are decision makers. Decision makers in Rabat and Algiers have shown no appetite for peace for the time being. No appetite for peace, for appeasement and nation building. They're just taking a break for now so as to avoid the optics of governments only interested in conflicts when thousands of people died. They will soon regroup and resume their pointless conflict. In the northeast of the Maghreb, the two rival governments in Libya have also taken an involuntary sort of break from their conflict to seem to appear to be busy helping Derna and the region deal with a historic storm that led to devastation of biblical proportions. But just like Algerians and Moroccans, the rival governments in Libya will eventually resume their conflict and will maintain the hellish life of the Libyan people essentially unchanged. And so the Maghreb region over the past 2 weeks was entirely defined by the quake in Morocco and the flood in Libya, and rightly so. As of today, Friday the 22nd of September, the general picture coming from the region is one of nearly 7,000 deaths from the two natural disasters. Beside the 3,300 official death toll so far in Libya, displacements amount to 43,000 people. Some 10,000 people are still missing, which means we should brace for a greater death toll in the weeks to come. The recovery phase is facing incredible hurdles, starting with the military under the control of the creepy and violent Khalifa Haftar, seeking to control everything from preventing journalists to do their work to taking over the aid sent to Libya so that Haftar army gets credit for its distribution, to getting Haftar's son and other politicians position themselves to benefit from the crisis when more corruption opportunity comes, which is pretty soon. Meanwhile, there is a lack of clean water, an urgent need for food, for medical help, for mental health, and psychosocial support. Naturally, with such inept and unqualified leaders as Haftar and the Eastern Parliament chief Ghili Saleh, the people of Derna are upset, so much so that the Khalifa Haftar regime shut down access to communication services to prevent the people of Derna from expressing their rage and organizing themselves. As usual, the Haftar political machine blames terrorists or a rupture in the optical fiber link to Derna, and explanation that many really have been rejecting. Local experts say that while the Haftar and Aguilaz of the world and their families were busy enriching themselves, the region's infrastructure has gravely decayed to a point of no return. AFP reports that the dams that were overwhelmed by the torrential rains of September the 10th had developed cracks as far back as the 1990s, and they knew it. Meanwhile, everyone is concerned about the risk of disease outbreak. That's particularly the case for contaminated water and the lack of sanitation. And so where Libya is headed is a huge question mark, and there is a strong likelihood, from my humble opinion, that Khalifa Haftar and his cronies and those supporting him will seize the opportunity to curtail liberties, launch more repressive measures, and take advantage of the crisis to divert billions of dollars that were supposed to go to the region for rebuilding. Now in Morocco, the death toll from the quake that hit the El Haouz province on September the 8th is near 3,000 as of today. As in any such event in such magnitude, the problems are enormous, starting with the challenges of getting rescuers and help to affected villages within reasonable time, as such many of the people affected by the quake have been angry at the pace of help, even not understanding why the government in Rabat chose only 4 countries to help. There has been a lot of talks about that topic, which obviously combines practical and logistical aspects of dealing with disasters and geopolitics on the other side. Setting that aside, the Moroccan government said it will spend approximately a little over $11 billion for reconstruction, rehousing, and socioeconomic development for the quake-hit areas, as reported by AFP. And that would be 120 billion dirhams spread over a 5-year period to help over 4.2 million people affected by the earthquake. Now, moving into the Sahel, the countries that experienced coups recently have also been facing extraordinary circumstances. In Mali, a Tuareg rebellion has reignited in the north of the country. Global media tends to call the Tuaregs rebels, separatists, pro-independence, but at the end of the day, we are talking about people who have suffered from both neglect and repression from the Malian government in the south. There is certainly and undoubtedly, an ethnic dimension to the conflict, but in my opinion, it's more about the need for communities in large countries, such as Mali, to manage their own affairs, including handling their own security and economy, etc. In this case, the Tuaregs have always called for a federal model that gives them the right to make decisions for their own communities, including security. This is not rocket science, and central governments in African nations have always been crippled by incompetence and corruption. And so it is conceivable that decentralized governance may be long overdue. And so with the military junta in the south seeking more power, the Tuaregs in the north felt compelled to take up arms after the UN and foreign forces left the region. This week, the conflict worsened when the Tuaregs captured several government soldiers, arresting them, and reported killing a dozen others, and allegedly downing 2 military planes in Lere in the Timbuktu region. 2 military bases may have fallen in the hands of the Tuaregs despite the government forces getting the support of the ruthless mercenaries of the Wagner group. To understand the anger of the Tuareg people, all you need to do is look at what is happening to one of their iconic city, the city of Timbuktu. An excellent report from AFP shows that, and I am quoting here, the tens of thousands of its inhabitants remain almost completely cut off from the world, with the agonizing scenario having become a reality. Half a dozen witnesses have described to AFP a life of scarcity and fear as shells have begun to rain down on people increasingly feel in danger in a city where basically necessities are starting to run short, end of quote. Those relentlessly attacking the region are the militants of the Al-Qaeda-linked the Support Group for Islam and Muslims, or GSIM, which the government, with its Russian consultants and fighters, has not been able to contain. As such, Timbuktu is and has been blockaded, and the only ones able to free them are their own people, if allowed. Heavily armed jihadists are apparently everywhere in the region, roaming free on motorbikes. So if you are curious about the history and the architecture and you want to be a tourist, well, you can no longer visit Timbuktu. Even Sky Mali, the only airline serving Timbuktu, has temporarily canceled its service to the northern city due to a shelling attack that took place near the airport. The jihadists have been extending their hold over rural areas around the better defended towns in northern Mali, likely with the aim of increasing pressure on the central government rather than taking over the towns themselves. In Niger, a country which also experienced a coup against its president, is also facing a host of problems that promise to magnify the instability of the country coming up, but also beyond and into West Africa. Already we're seeing how West Africa leaders and their ECOWAS organization are lacking creative idea to contain all these coups and crises in the region. There is no comprehensive, intelligent response to coups except imposing sanctions and threatening military intervention to reimpose a highly disliked, deposed president, Mohamed Bazoum. To see how the crisis in Niger is affecting its West African neighbors because of lack of ECOWAS foresight, consider the fact that millions of dollars of food and perishable goods are being wasted along the borders with Niger because ECOWAS enacted sanctions against Niger. Trucks like those seen in Melonville and Benin have been stranded for nearly 2 weeks. The drivers and owners of these trucks and their merchandise are likely to go bankrupt and lost because of the decision that does not necessarily harm the junta proper, but the populations of Niger and beyond, and those around them who depend on open trade. In fact, the bridge border shared between Benin and Niger was closed by the Niger military junta, not ECOWAS, but the junta as a response to ECOWAS sanctions. They figure that's going to hurt more traders coming from ECOWAS nations. To make things worse, nature has not been accommodating to the stranded trucks. It has been raining for weeks, and when the sun hits, it hits hard to the point that food rottens very quickly. In Niger itself, as if poverty was not enough, food prices have been spiking about 21%, according to AFP, with the UN warning more people are at risk of severe food insecurity. So of course, there are more flashpoints in the greater Northern Africa region, but these 4 flashpoints have been dominant stories this week that promise to make the rest of the year a difficult one, and 2024 probably another wasted year. Now head to north-africa.com, that's north-africa.com for more details, or send me an email if you want to reach out. Thank you. Until next time, goodbye.